I'm Eric Newton, and this is The Together Show. We all know relationships take work, but what is that work, and how do we do it? As a former divorce lawyer, I've watched thousands of couples break up firsthand. Having seen the worst in relationships, I decided to try to help couples stay together. So on this show, we talk to real couples and find out what love really looks like.
I said, how can you do this? James had said to me, I still love you. I always love you. I did not love this other person. That was a very key point for me to move forward.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for listening. I'm excited to announce that we've launched a Patreon campaign. If you'd like to support what we're doing here at the Together Show, please take a look at the page that we've created and consider donating any amount that you would feel comfortable doing. Even $1 or $2 makes a huge difference. You can find the campaign at www.patreon.com/together. That's patreon.com/together. As always, thank you for listening to the show. Your support is invaluable. Now on to our couple. If anyone ever seemed destined to be married, it was James and Yvette. To hear them tell the story, it's clear that they had been in love and denying the fact to each other for over a decade before they finally made something happen about it. And once the dam broke, they were married in 6 months. This was no surprise to their friends. Basically, everyone knew that it was inevitable. They loved each other, they had for years, they were both gorgeous and successful, and basically a perfect match. What could go wrong? Well, fast forward a few years, add an adoption, a baby, a career change, and all the accompanying pressures that go along with that into the mix. And what happened to this couple was infidelity. And it almost destroyed everything. But somehow these two worked it out, and they're still working it out. And today's episode is about the ongoing, messy, and imperfect process of recovering from infidelity. It's probably impossible to listen to any kind of a story in this world without becoming somewhat judgmental about the facts. But I invite you to listen to this story from the perspective of an archaeologist rather than a judge, if possible. What I mean by that is that there is something here for us to understand about ourselves that we can only get by remaining open to the facts rather than coming from our preconceived ideas about those facts. And James and Yvette have been through a lot, and they wanted to come on this show to share with other couples who may be experiencing the same breakdown in trust, that there is, or at least there can be, light at the end of the tunnel. And this is the first time they've spoken about this issue publicly, and so every answer isn't perfectly polished for our consumption. The interview is raw, but it's always honest. I got a lot out of it, and I think you will too. So with that, let's go to James and Yvette. What point did you decide to adopt kids?
When we realized we couldn't have children.
Yeah.
Was that a shock?
There is just something in me that thought maybe I was 41.
Right.
That's pretty late to start thinking about it.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make sure he was okay with the possibility of adopting.
We tried, and we tried for it. I mean, people, we adopted 2 kids, and people would say, it's so generous of you. I'm like, no, we didn't do this to be nice people.
Yeah.
Like, we tried really hard to have our own kids, and
That's
then
the right
we
answer.
turned to adoption. Like, we did it to be selfish, to be honest with you.
Well,
we
you
wanted,
did it. Yeah, you want to be parents.
Yeah.
This is the way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. It takes out, it makes it more, I don't know, legitimate somehow. That
Yeah.
we were doing it to be parents as opposed to some broader, more abstract.
Yeah, we weren't
concept.
riding in on a white horse to give someone a better life.
Right.
Or, yeah.
Yeah, which is just sort of weirdly egotistical.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, so then did you have, you'd already been together known each other for so long. I'm curious how the how did the honeymoon phase that most people experience manifest for you two?
Oh, that was good. We had a great honeymoon. We had a good phase. But there is a lot to know about someone that you have known as a friend for a long time.
Right. I mean, the relationship that James and I had was pretty social.
Yeah.
It was around friends. We I mean, we did spend time together as friends on vacations together. You really do get to know them. But then it's funny, when you close the doors, I think that's what's truly revealed. Like,
yes,
how is that relationship going to be? You don't have to be on. You're in your kind of very raw state.
Yeah.
And things definitely started surfacing for both of us.
What were some of those at the beginning?
It wasn't really at the beginning. Mm-mm. It was after we had a kid. Having a kid,
child changed.
Yeah, the child changed. Just the swirl of chaos that results from having a kid, and then it dredges up all these issues that from your own childhood that you probably have just been, allowing just to sort of sit there in that sort of unopened room.
Now, issues related directly to parenting or
parenting, life, your value as a person, your ideas of yourself, and that caused a lot of chaos.
So up until having a kid, things were just sort of smooth and easy?
Well, yeah, because we would do everything together.
Yeah.
So, hey, let's go out to eat. Let's go get a drink. Let's go do this. And when you have a child, then there's this third person that you're being concerned with and having to care for. And that kind of puts a stop at things.
Right.
For me, talk about bringing up stuff. As a childhood, I wasn't even that conscious of it, but I fell into this. I went from a 60-hour career, 60, 70-hour work career, started painting. That became very successful. And then all of a sudden I had this kid, and I felt like I had stopped dead in my tracks.
In a new career, too.
In a new career that was doing really well.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, okay, well, I should be at home. I should be a mom. I should be doing this. And I found myself getting really depressed.
Oh, I'm really curious about these shoulds. Now, are you saying that these were the shoulds that were coming up from old patterns that you learned in childhood or what have you?
I don't know if it would be a pattern. I was single. My mother was a single mother.
Uh-huh.
And so my mother had to work full time. And I thought, I'm not going to be that mom. I'm going to stay home. I'm going to raise my kid and be involved in their life. Well, I basically sacrificed my life. Instead of, being a parent, I became a full-time mother instead of a person. I lost myself, basically.
Yes.
So my should of thinking that I should be a mom doesn't neglected to include being a woman, a human being, an artist, and everything else that I was.
And you hadn't made that distinction, so then you were feeling depressed.
Right. I wasn't even conscious of all these things that were actually happening.
Right.
Yeah.
And then how did you become aware of that?
James is pretty good. He helped me through that. And at a certain point, I finally put my child in part-time daycare. And I thought, I've been missing all this. And I started painting again and reconnecting with myself. And that's when I really realized how much I was missing out on.
Right.
I want to go back to something you said, like the honeymoon phase. I think that what enables people sometimes to have a honeymoon phase, and why kids, in many cases, and specifically in our case, it's like, in retrospect, we lived our life kind of on the surface of our life. Right. It's sort of like you can have a friend that you can have an easy friendship with, and nothing really changes about it because they never really challenge you. Right. And so what happened was that when we adopted a baby, we did open adoption, so we were there for the birth, and for both our kids. And I remember the day Logan was born, I wasn't in the delivery room. I was outside. Yvette was in the delivery room with him. But the moment I held him in my arms, I felt this incredibly strong idea come up, and it said, you have to be a better person. Yeah. And right on the heels of that came that voice, which I call the witness for the prosecution, which is an attorney you might appreciate. It's that undermining, undercutting voice that doesn't really have our back, that says things like that. Like, who are you kidding? You're not going to be a better person. You're the same flawed at your core person you've always been told you were, that you believe yourself to be.
Which is a funny voice because it thinks it's doing something good.
Yeah, well,
it's
core. There's a lot of ways to define what that is, but it's very much of the ego and of that lack and fear and control. And it said, you're not going to be a better person, move on. And that created some real turmoil in my life.
At this point, you were 40-something.
46.
And so you'd been thinking about
being a dad for
for years.
Decades, yeah.
And your perspective on your own potential parenthood was that you were going to be
great dad.
Of course.
Yeah.
So then this voice comes up at the moment that you hold this little baby that you've been essentially waiting for 46 years or some period of time. And it undercuts all that entire vision.
Yeah.
And so then you're stuck. Then you're just kind of floating. You don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know where to ground yourself.
I couldn't stay on the surface of life any longer, and I didn't feel confident that I could handle the depths.
Yeah. Did you know what those were at the time?
No, I don't think anyone knows. You can read every baby book in the world, and you're unprepared, for when actually having a baby.
The depths, you mean?
Yeah.
The surface and the depths.
Yeah, just because
life.
When you talk to people who don't have kids and you talk about the fatigue that parents experience, and you'll get sometimes like, oh yeah, man, we used to rage until 2-3 in the morning, and I remember when it's like, no, you have no idea. It's not the physical exhaustion as much as it's physical exhaustion coupled with emotional exhaustion because the stakes are so high and there's so much going on, and this is even when you adopt. I mean, when mothers give natural birth, they have all the hormones and stuff that certainly has to create additional sort of turmoil.
And the stakes are high, just to be clear about that, because you're responsible for this being now.
Yes,
Beautiful
absolutely.
little, it's amazing.
Wow, that's such a high level of responsibility. Right, and then so those high stakes start dredging up all these kind of patterns and conditions. Fears
and feelings, and you end up
And
getting stuck in your head. And you get and that voice, that, like I said, the witness, I think that's the source of the shoulds.
Right.
That's its litany. You should do this. You can't do that. You should, da 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 da. And so, I was in my head so much about life as opposed to being in life, and
So how long did that last?
Well, 10 months or so. We joked before about me being kind of a player, but I really liked dating, and I liked flirting, and I was and one of the things that I learned early on that validated me was I could flirt with and sleep with women. And that became my coping mechanism in a response.
Right.
And so I would enter a situation. I'm sure people who are I'm sure MMA fighters are they walk into a scene and they think I could kick that guy's ass.
Right.
Right. Because that's their skill set. That's how they validate themselves. I could walk into a crowd and go, I could go out with her.
Yeah.
I could attract her. And so in that situation of not feeling validated at home, not thinking I could be a dad, having a terrible job, I would find myself flirting, and I flirted with the person who flirted back. So I had an affair for 10 months, a long time.
So this was, now you were saying you were in that state for 10 months.
Yeah.
Well, the affair was 10 months. I think the state had been happening almost all your life, triggered by Logan.
Yeah.
And then the situation of being a parent.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're so strong now, so you must have learned something from it. And it's also specifically interesting because so many people state infidelity as their boundary that can never be broken. That's the
Well, for me, it was my boundary that can never be broken.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So what happened?
Well,
I
go ahead. I'll let you answer
I mean,
first.
I won't go into the details of exactly how I found out, but I did find out. And I was devastated. I think it was probably the most devastating thing that ever happened to me. And the reason why I feel it was so devastating is because of several reasons. I finally decided to get married, finally decided to have children, thought I knew this guy. And we had adopted a child. And this child, when you have a baby, when you give birth to a child, yes, it's extremely important and valuable. You give birth. But when you adopt, you enter into this relationship with someone where they give you their child.
Right.
There's a lot of weight behind that.
Double responsibility.
And, here we have made this decision and met with this woman and said, we will take care of this child. We want to parent this child. And I felt like not only are we letting our child down, we'd be letting her down.
Yeah.
And I just feel like that was a really pivotal moment for me.
Yeah.
And I was in the midst of my depression. And so it just threw me. And I think every bit of rage I ever had came to surface at that point. Truly. I think it's brought everything to surface for me.
And you directed it at him, without no holds barred, you just let it fly?
Deservedly, yeah.
It's funny. I still remember the moment it happened. It was like, okay, we got to take care of this. How are we going to deal with it?
That's an interesting response, as opposed to I'm out of here.
Oh, I wanted to be out of there too,
no,
believe me. But I mean, I'm not kidding. If it wasn't for my son, I would have been out of there.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I thought, okay, I have a responsibility that's greater than me. I need to handle it. If it doesn't work out, then I'm okay with that. But I need to at least pursue to figure out if this is going to be something worth continuing or not.
Yeah.
And your love and all that just was completely out the door. It was almost like, okay, function time, survival time.
So it didn't go. So a lot of times when love goes out the door, it goes to the opposite extreme. You know, it slingshots over to hatred or extreme.
I think it could have. I think it almost did at certain points.
You certainly said it a lot.
I did. I'm still alarmed at how angry I was.
Yeah.
Are you really?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I try. It was incredible energy.
Right.
That I don't think I've quite experienced since.
Yeah.
Good.
Well, but I mean, it blasted out.
It did.
It looks like it accomplished something, which is
Absolutely.
what you're coming
Well,
to next.
Right.
It provided the opportunity to deal with stuff. You know, like
Because you had a meeting.
I would never say that my affair was the best thing that ever happened to us. Our response to that affair was the best thing that ever happened to us.
Right.
Yes.
You know, and we did a couple of things. We had a fantastic marriage counselor.
Did you already have her?
No.
Nope.
So you
literally opened up the phone book. I think it was like early internet days. So it was like, you find a therapist and fight it now.
Right.
And it was like the first person you called, right?
Yeah.
Wow, and you found her out of the phone
It was
book?
like, or
Something like that. Honey, it wasn't the first day. The first day of the internet was in 1994 or so.
right,
so.
I know, but it was, you just didn't go on your laptop and, whip out a name. You really, it's like you had to do a little bit more
So we
work.
found her and we learned to meditate. And somehow we did it. Like I had tried meditation for about a year in my early 30s and failed completely at it and thought my mind was too crazy to meditate. But in that very swirling sort of chaos of life, I found that there was another approach to meditation called Vedic meditation.
But did you find that at the same time?
Yeah.
No, it was a couple of months later.
Oh, a couple months after we were into marriage counseling at that point.
And did she suggest it or?
No, I
No.
suggested it.
But one thing we forgot is also, I mean, this was like our ground zero, an incredible opportunity to really do some self-exploration.
Yeah.
Right.
And part of that exploration was also through our therapist and just searching our souls. James also dealt with some parents as alcoholics, so he pursued.
Yeah, my dad was an alcoholic. I went to, what's it called? ACOA, Adult Children of Alcoholics.
Yeah.
And I went to some of those meetings for a while.
Yeah, so you had some of that support group. I went to an Al-Anon meeting because I felt like I needed some support.
That's fascinating too. So Al-Anon is for people who are in relationships with addicts.
Yeah,
Right.
and I wasn't. It's interesting. I think I read a book called The Addictive Personality, and a lot of it resonated with me. I don't think I had ever been what you would call classically addicted to anything, but I certainly had the tendency to go overboard on things.
Yeah.
But I think having my dad's example of being an alcoholic for decades, I never really, if anything, I was addicted to attention, to sort of sexual attention and energy,
Right.
which is, I think, different than being a sex addict. Like I wasn't like,
Well, it sounds like whether it was directly applicable or not, it provided a support group for you, Yvette, or a support structure.
Yeah.
So that you had, in addition to therapy, you had another outlet for...
Right, that it was also not involved with James. Or it wasn't with James. It was something I could do on my own.
Yeah.
So that I could... And I read books. I talked to people. I just did everything I could to kind of just figure out, okay, how do we deal with this? What is my role in this situation? How did I create this situation?
Right.
And James was doing his own self-work too. And through this exploration, I think that's when you were talking to a friend that said, hey, have you heard about meditation? I'm doing this
I read on his
meditation."
blog and I called him up and I'm like, and it seemed interesting. It seemed like a different idea about meditation. And I went to an introductory talk and I was like, I want to do this. And somehow, I don't know how, I convinced Yvette to do it with me because I knew that I wanted to do it, but I wouldn't be able to take the course without her because she already disliked me intensely. and I was already sleeping downstairs, on the couch. And
Yeah.
like literally she would come down at 2 a.m, wake me up and go, I am going to divorce you,
If you're just joining us, you're listening to The Together Show, the podcast about what's really going on in relationships. My guests today are James and Yvette Brown, and we've been discussing infidelity, the dark times that come as a result of that, and then how one recovers from infidelity, which is what I want to turn to next. But Yvette, you were just saying something which I found really fascinating, which was that for a long time you held a good amount of shame about the infidelity, but that's changed.
It has changed. Just things change over time. I've just become more comfortable with myself. But I think doing this podcast is a way to share with the world that you can move on and you can have a relationship. You may not have the same relationship. It's going to be different. But I feel that if I don't share this experience, other people can live in a world where it's just in their head. And if they hear my experience, maybe they'll, feel more comfortable about expressing themselves
or being more hopeful.
Hopeful, yes.
Like when we were in the depths of it, when I was sleeping downstairs, I said, and we were arguing, and our marriage counseling sessions were often acrimonious, and Yvette would often tell me, no one survives this. No couple survives this. If they stay together for the kids, then they're damaged as a result, and the kids grow up in a home that's not full of love. And what occurred to us about a year and a half ago is it just came up, and I said, we should write about this. And we're kind of in the process of writing an article about this that might be tentatively titled How We Survived His Affair and Thrived.
Well, let me know when it's out.
Yeah.
I'm happy to put it up on our blog.
And so, and it's that idea that, we're stronger as a couple now because of all that we've gone through and the way we've gone through it. And we haven't just survived the affair. We're doing great in comparison.
You two are clearly thriving.
Yeah, and so...
Yes.
Well, let me back up then. So I want to get a sense of what the dark times were like. You were just starting to describe it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to try to get a more full picture of what that period was like, and then the steps that you actually took to come out of it. So you were sleeping downstairs for one thing, and you were fighting all the time for another. And how old was the baby?
Year and a half.
Not quite 2.
Yeah. So you were still embroiled in the most full-time parenting that you can have with a toddler.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what else? What was happening during this period? What was it like?
A lot of shutdown, like friends.
It really
the affair
affected our friends.
affected a lot of people.
Did everybody
friends
know?
Or family?
Well, I called certain friends immediately because I just was floored, and they swept in and were wonderful, and so our really close friends knew. They were very, very supportive. It did really affect them, though. You have friends that are married, and when your very dear friend has an affair and you don't know about it, you really examine your life and your relationships, and you feel like, oh my God, this is going to happen to anyone. It happened to them. It could happen to me.
And also they want to support you.
They want to support me, but then they're kind of like, who do I support?
Right, right.
Before I used to support the relationship. Now, whose side do I choose?
Oh, I think everyone chose your side.
Well,
I don't think
I think
anyone.
we did.
versus the relationship itself.
Yeah.
Because that's a concept, right? If there's 3 entities, you can choose to support any one of them.
No, they supported Yvette.
Okay. Wow, that must have been hard for you. I mean, I know that I know you think of yourself as the perpetrator, and in some universe you are. But on the other hand, that must have been a hard time for you too. You were out in the cold.
It was a hard time. I have to say, I always felt that we would get through it.
That's a very important point, because I think that if James didn't feel... James had said to me, I said, how can you do this? And you said, I still love you. I always love you. I did not love this other person. That was a very key point for me to move forward.
Yeah.
So, that's a very good point.
And when we graduated from marriage counseling, when we moved up to San Francisco for this job that I took, still at a time when things were kind of precarious.
Mm-hmm. Oh, this was all still in L.A.?
Yeah, this is all still in
Okay,
L.A. So, the marriage counselor said, when you guys came in, I knew you'd stay together. And I was like, fascinating.
How did she? Is it a she? How did she know?
I don't know. We haven't asked her
We
that.
don't know.
I want to write to her about that question as we're getting ready to write this article, because I want to. Maybe that would be a nice coda to it. But I think that I don't know. It's interesting. One of the questions Yvette had at the time was, yeah, how can you have an affair and love me? How can you? And I I just compartmentalized things. Like I had this. It was amazing to think that I had this crazy life going where I was a husband and a parent and having an affair for a long time. But my ability to wall things off and compartmentalize was a coping mechanism I developed growing up, and so I could live two separate lives.
Yeah.
It's amazing not to have to live that way, to come through that. One of the things that storm did was bash down all those walls, and I had to really deal with who I was, the fears of who I thought I was, the truth of who I actually was, and be grounded in that truth, and then be able to move forward from there.
That sounds amazing, but it's a big concept.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying that because of the trauma of having to face that you were the kind of person who would do and did do this thing, in the therapeutic process and in the traumatic, stormy, angry process that followed, your ability to keep up compartmentalizing barriers fell apart?
Yeah.
And then the result of that falling apart was just a wash of messy emotion, or what was the result?
I don't even think it was that messy. Again, it's interesting because there's the different levels on which this all happens, right? There's the day-to-day level in which we still fought, where and my actions were constrained, in terms of who I could go to lunch with and what I could say to who, and there was the tumult of parenting. I was freelance at that point because I'd lost that job, thank God, terrible job that I had, and just making life work. But underneath it was a sense of calm and certitude and confidence.
From what? Stemming from where?
From within. Coming from within.
Not
it's like you had been revealed, and it was like,
I lived most of my life feeling that I was flawed at my core.
Yes,
and then
as so many of us do.
And then discovered I wasn't. So
even you got to unpack that, because you discovered that you weren't flawed by doing a thing that most people consider terrible and that harmed the person you love the most. So how does that follow?
It follows from learning to meditate, honestly, because
that was the process.
Yeah, but it's also an experience, and the experience connects you with something that for me was very grounding, and from that more grounded place, I felt I could navigate the stuff that we were going through.
The recovery is, of course, an ongoing and never-ending process, but the extreme pain, where Yvette, you were just furious and thought, boy, this is going to end.
Yeah.
And you were sleeping on the couch, James, and probably feeling, even though you had a core of certainty, you were still feeling pretty upset and sad.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, life was hard.
How and when did that end?
For me, it was I had to plunge also into some really deep personal exploration. Like I said, I had a support system of friends, and we went to this church called Agape, which is like a spiritual center. So I had that kind of also.
Agape in LA, amazing place.
I had that. The Al-Anon, the therapy. I feel like it's like, okay, I need every tool I can to help me rediscover what is going on and how I can recover from this. It was almost like I was recovering from some traumatic experience. I felt a little PTSD.
Sure.
Every time he left the house, it's like, okay.
Yeah, PTSD is a great way to describe it too.
What is going to happen next? Is he going to come home? Am I going to get this weird phone call, or is something going to happen? And it's a horrible feeling not being able to trust someone that you should trust, and the person you live with, every day, wondering, okay.
And then, so when was it a breakthrough moment or is it just sort of a slow process and suddenly you realized, oh, I can live with him again?
Yes, it was a slow process. I do think that once we started meditating, that really helped me, because I was so stressed that I just I needed a place where I could just be really, really de-stress and find a little bit more grounded situation so that I can have more perspective, so I can see and get out of my head.
Right.
And that was probably the biggest tool for me.
Yeah.
But it did. I think.
What about therapy? It sounds like you needed it, but you're saying it wasn't quite as big a tool as just the meditation.
Oh no!
In the beginning,
it was really important. The therapy was really important because she helped point out a lot of things that I wasn't seeing.
Like,
not taking care of myself, not respecting myself, handing over, kind of being submissive, allowing James to, go out and continue his life, and feeling like I wasn't worth saying anything to him. There was a lot of worthiness issues for me coming up.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I think was for both of us. In fact, when you really think about it, I think self-worth issues were underneath all of it. Like, it's why you didn't feel good putting yourself forward.
Or first,
and that comes from childhood. Like I've always said, one of the funniest is not the way to describe it, is that when I first started going out with Yvette, and we would approach a door, and I would naturally hold back to allow her to go forward, but she would also be holding back. Huh. And so we'd kind of bump into each other in that moment of awkward courtesy.
Right.
Right. And so, and not putting herself first, not allowing herself to be first. And for me, a big part of my personality was this talkative, jokey, funny, flirty person, all trying to mask big self-worth issues underneath.
Right.
And so to address those, therapy is essential, reading is essential, all of these intellectual pursuits. But I think that
you need to get out of your head sometimes.
Yeah, and that's what meditation did. Meditation, like, it's one thing to say, at your core, you're this unquenchable sort of, experience of contentment,
right,
bliss. That's a nice thing to write on a card, right. And I would have Yvette write it because she has much better handwriting than I do. And if I gave you that card with a flower, that'd be nice to have. But that's an intellectual construct, and the experience is what informs all that. And I think it makes the work of therapy more effective.
Right.
I think I think that they're all important. Everything was important.
That makes so much sense.
But you kind of have it.
Yeah, I don't think
both
one
levels.
could have solved any of it. And when I say the word solved, I think it's an evolutionary, ongoing process.
Yeah.
Right.
When our therapy stopped when we moved to San Francisco, which was about a year after I found out about the affair. And so I was pretty terrified because my support system, a big chunk of my support system, was going to be lost.
Right.
To an area where I really didn't know anyone.
Yeah.
With a little kid. Just starting over, friends, everyone gone. It was like, oh, where's my support system? So I think that kind of was a setback for me emotionally.
Did you find a new Al-Anon meeting up here? Or?
No, I didn't. I just kind of plunged into life.
And trust has continued to develop during this time.
Yeah, it was. It's taken me a long time. I really can't pinpoint the day or time or year.
Because he was asking about, was there some breakthrough moment? I think there's not there's just lots of, it's like
being chipped away.
A series of chipped away, or a series of tiny hurdles that are jumped over.
Yeah,
I would go traveling enough for business, and then it would sort of, her hackles would go up, and I would be sort of on guard, and then it would go okay. And so the more you repeat that experience, and it goes okay, and informed by love and shared experience, I don't think it's a breakthrough. I think it's a chipping away or a honing, or it's a growth process. Trust gets torn down fast, but it has to be rebuilt slowly.
Very long. I called the therapist from Los Angeles, and she just said, you know what, how is James? What is he doing that makes you feel you can't trust him? Look at your daily actions and interactions with him. Is there anything that's bringing up a red flag for you? And there was nothing. So everything that was coming up for me was old stuff. It wasn't real anymore. It was all emotionally based.
Right.
And so that every time James would leave, I'd have to kind of check in with myself. Okay, everything's been great. We have a great time. How are things going? Is there any reason why you can't trust him anymore? And the answer was, there was no reason not to trust him. So I had to constantly check in with myself every time he'd go out of town or come home late, because it just keeps coming up.
What's so present to me when you're talking about this is the immense amount of work.
Oh my God,
you're going through. And, you must, looking back, you must be very glad you did that work, because the two of you now have this palpable love for one another and a strong relationship. So Yvette's work is fairly obvious or clear through this point. Your work is a little more subtle.
Well, yeah, I was going to say it's what's been made possible for me is to just live more authentically. Like, not to, like, I'm a great liar. Like, I had developed the capacity to be a really good liar early in life.
Yeah.
And it's what enabled me to maintain this facade seamlessly. It is so nice not to have to lie. It's so nice to trust myself more, to not go through life, being pulled in these different directions. Like, it's it's so much easier, actually.
I'm curious, though, maybe this is not a fair question, but I find myself curious whether it was an easier process for you to recover from this than it was for Yvette.
I would say yes. Because, because her question is, can I trust him? And because you're not in someone's head, you don't know.
Yeah.
Right? Especially when this is a person who'd fooled you for a while. Right? So, yeah, I would say that the degree of difficulty was much harder on her. In me, I knew that I had changed.
Now,
And I knew that I was acting differently, and I knew I would enter rooms with a different mindset, and I knew I wasn't, I could sense more certainly what had changed. So, yeah, I think it was easier
which
for
was
me
all
in that
kind
respect.
of positive for you, too.
Yeah. I used to be really angry.
Yeah.
A year after I learned to meditate, my mom said, "Wow, you're happier and less angry." I'm like, "Yes, Mom, both of those are true. You should learn." Right? The fountain of anger in our
Let's
family's
do some Vedic
lives.
meditation,
Yeah,
Mom.
exactly. And so she did learn, actually. After I became a teacher,
Right.
she learned. It was awesome. Hi, Mom. I love you so much. So I think that I used to beat myself up a lot. I used to just, the way we talk to ourselves inside our heads, no one deserves to be talked about that way.
Yeah.
Talked to that way. And I just find I just don't do it that much anymore. Not nearly as much as I used to.
Yeah.
And so I guess you're right. There is a part of it, it's the thinking that results in the idea that guilt is a really cheap emotion, because guilt is a way of saying this lachrymose sort of like, oh, don't hurt me. I am so down on myself. You don't have to punish me.
Right. Yes. Right.
And so, yeah, to some degree, when you're dealing with someone in a relationship who doesn't trust you, you sometimes may have to go a little overboard and say, I'm, you know what I mean? To sort of, to convince them of what is true inside.
Right.
So there is some of that.
Yvette, following up on this piece around self-flagellation, do you still notice that James does that sometimes?
No, I don't think he does it.
Did it ever provide value for you when you noticed him doing it, or did it make you feel worse?
No, it did provide value. I felt that he did need to prove to me that he was trustworthy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
that I'd done something wrong and knew it.
Yes, and that he needed to apologize and acknowledge that it was wrong, and that he did not want to do it again. And
yeah.
I think the self-flagellation was pretty early on, but now I think it's more of a consideration of, hey, I'm going here. This is where I'm going to be. Now, there's
trust, you mean?
Trust. And that's kind of an alteration in our relationship, whereas before it's like, yeah, I'm going to be late. I'm going to be going to this. Okay, no problem. Well, it shifted to, this is where I'm going to be. This is how long I'm going to be. This is who I'm going to be with, because I needed that.
Well, it strikes me that might actually be what trust is founded on for everybody. It's just not, and it's such contrast for most people because they haven't had that specific break. But how do you define trust? I've been trying to figure this out in these episodes.
When you say trust, is that you don't have to think about those things.
Oh, yeah. Right.
So if you really do trust someone, you don't have to think about them.
Wow.
The other thing about trust is that at some level in the interactions of individuals, of people in a relationship, there's always unpredictability. There's always the inability to absolutely know.
Right.
Right. And so if trust is based on rock solid certitude, you're just always going to be disappointed.
Right. You would have to be.
And so a really powerful thing that Debbie Robbins, another sort of coach therapist we worked with for a while individually, I remember told you once, is that you cannot predict what James is going to do. You have to know that you can deal with whatever comes.
Right. And then I will be okay.
And you'll be okay.
Yep. You know what? He might have an affair again, and
then you leave him and you'll be okay.
Right. What are you going to do? You're just going to deal with it and you're going to be okay. And
so the ability to sort of come from that place of I can adapt, I can deal, I can is sort of trusting in yourself. Is a big platform from which you can trust in others and in the world.
Right. You can't, it sounds like, trust in somebody else unless you have that platform.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And one of the things that we've talked about, it helps us not just in having recovered from the affair, and that process is continuing, but even in the day-to-day, we still, on the back of my business card, there's a great quote from Yvette, and it says, "I still get mad at my husband sometimes, ... and the ... contains an expletive. But since I learned to meditate, I don't just stay mad."
Right.
And she was saying that to a friend once, because I think when I got back from India, someone had said something like, "Well, so you guys never fight anymore?" And Yvette's like laughs out loud. She goes, "No, we still fight." But it allows us to just recover faster.
Well, let me pivot the conversation a tiny bit.
Yeah.
What is the healthy way to relate to or think of the third party, the person with which somebody has an affair?
How would I relate?
Yeah, well, I'm curious. So there's this person out there who's a human being who intentionally or unintentionally had a major painful impact on your life. Do you continue to be angry at this person? Do you resolve that anger and move on to something else? What's the way to... Do you just forget about them?
Good question.
Again, I think it's a process. I mean, initially, of course, I was extremely angry about it, and this person. I mean, they were married too, which just is shocking to me. I kind of thought she was also a victim because she was younger, and James has a very good skill on persuasion. And so I thought of her a little bit as a victim, but also I was angry at the same time. And I pretty much have let it go.
Yeah. I mean, it's a delicate question from my end because I wouldn't want to trigger something for you. On the other hand, I'm imagining that holding on to anger is probably just not useful for you.
No.
But then too much compassion is also kind of wishy-washy. But
I don't know if I have compassion. I just simply don't. Yeah. She's just not in my world.
Yeah.
And for my part, I think I just feel sorry. I feel, I understanding the dynamics that were at play and why I got into an affair and only imagining what might have been at the root of it for her.
Yeah. I
just hope she finds some path through it or to live with herself better.
Yeah.
That's what I would hope.
Yeah. Well, amen to that.
Yeah.
Well, I have so many more questions for the two of you, but we're running out of time. So let me end with this last question about what the two of you went through. If you met another couple who had just gone through something similar, what would you say to them about how to recover from it?
Well, if they were willing to make the effort, then I would tell them it's a very long process. It's a lot of work. You really have to do some personal exploration that, yes, there is a victim and a perpetrator, but really you have to look at your role and why that happened. For me, it was intense amount of personal exploration, and I feel like it has made me a much stronger human being, a much better human being. Our relationship is incredibly strong. And I would say, yes, there is hope and you can be done.
Yeah, that's great. James?
So what I would say is that what happens in situations like that is everyone gets all stirred up, right? And yet they have on the precipice of making these big decisions. Should we stay together? Should we not? Should we, in fact, when we were going through it, my mom reflexively was like, well, you have to stay together because you have kids. You have a kid. And I said, no, we don't have to stay together because we have a kid. We only have to stay together if we love each other, right? And I think that anything you can do, whether it's exercise, whether it's therapy, whether it's meditation, whether it's the confluence of all those things, anything you can do that allows for some clarity.
Right.
Like the clarity is what allows you to see what you really want to do, what really is right for you. Yeah. For some, I've taught couples who are on the precipice of divorce and they've learned to meditate, and the clarity has allowed them to see that, yeah, we're meant to divorce.
Right.
Right. That's salvaging it for them. Like staying together would have been the mistake for them.
Right.
But at least they could see that and feel more okay about their choice, maybe less regret. Yeah. It allowed us to see that we're meant to be together. And so we are.
Such a good story. And above all else, what's clear is that working through the process has made you so much more intimate with one another. And I want to highlight what you said at the beginning, which is that the affair wasn't the best thing that ever happened to you, but the way that you dealt with it was the best thing that ever happened to the two of you. It's just so obvious how close you are now. Well, thanks for being on the show. Let's finish with a game of this or that.
Okay.
Now, do you know how this works?
No, we have no idea.
No. It's the easiest game. You're going to know exactly what we're doing when you get it. I'm going to say this or that, and I'm going to point to one of you, and you're going to answer which one you prefer.
Oh, no. I'm so not good at... Go ahead.
I'll start with James. We'll start with an easy one. James, Mac or PC?
Mac.
It's easy.
Mac.
We're in San Francisco. How could it be anything else? Yeah. Okay. Yvette, angry or withdrawn?
Withdrawn.
Angry.
And is that a dynamic for the two of you?
Yeah.
That's pretty funny. That's such a common thing. Okay. Save or spend?
Spend.
Save.
Is that another thing for you guys?
A little bit.
Not even.
So,
okay.
It's not,
Okay.
Nothing's major. That's not
fine.
major.
To be bored or to be boring? Yvette.
To be?
Yeah.
Are you asking me if I am?
I'm saying, I don't know. It's a very open-ended question. To be bored or to be boring?
Oh, I want to say bored.
To be bored.
You both rather be bored. Okay. That makes sense to me. All right. And then the final question, my favorite one, always, if you had to either live forever, or die in the next 5 minutes, which would it be?
Oh.
Die in the next 5 minutes.
I was going to say die in the next 5 minutes.
You guys are just on the same page.
Yeah, I don't want to live forever. I don't want to know the future. No.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I so get it. All right, guys, thank you so much for being on.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for being just honest and talking about such an important
Thanks.
issue.
It was great. It was we were excited to come. This is the first time we've ever talked openly about this stuff.
Yeah.
Publicly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was lovely to have you on, and maybe we can have you as a follow-up because I have so many more questions for you.
Yeah, we'll talk about how we fight.
Yeah. We haven't even talked about that.
Yeah, we haven't.
Which you must do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot
Thanks.
again.
Thanks.
Well, that's it for the James and Yvette episode, everyone. Thanks for listening. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to us on iTunes. And if you'd like to support what we're doing here at The Together Show, please consider making a small donation to help keep us sustainable on our Patreon campaign. You can find that at www.patreon.com/together. That's patreon.com/together. And as always, thanks for listening. If you have any questions or comments, or if you'd like to be on the show, please reach out via one of our social platforms. You can find our website at www.together.guide. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/togethershow. Twitter and Instagram are both at @together_show, or you can email me at host@together.guide. Our producer is Charlene Goto. Our web designer is Courtney Munna. Our art director and the love of my life is Aubrey Pick. Thanks once again to my guests, James and Yvette. Guys, took a ton of courage to be on the show. I love you, and I can't wait to do some meditating. Be sure to tune in for Thursday's episode, in which you will hear...
main pillar for us is like being open and honest and upfront about what our needs, wants, and desires are. And I find that even being able to have the conversation removes a lot of like the mystery around things, and it becomes enough for me the vast majority of the time.
That's all for today, folks. See you next time.